Think. Thank you, Mrs. Khan, Birshus, Mrs. Khan, Mrs. Appel, Mrs. Braun, Rabbi Prince, all the faculty, and also just the people who are here. I know that last night was a late night for some with Slichos. I know there's a major Torah event, Torah in the City, also going on in Queens right now. So I'm honored that there's anyone here. I was not expecting a big crowd, so I really appreciate, I guess, the trip over the GWB may have worked in my favor for people who chose to stay here. I also just want to especially welcome my parents, who I have the pleasure of welcoming, Dr. And Mrs. Donath, who happen to be visiting from Minneapolis, so they're in town, and it's a treat to have them to share Torah in their presence. So in my side gig job, I also happen to be a rabbi of a shul. And as a rabbi of a shul, it's particularly difficult, especially in the last couple of years, to talk about any hot button issue. And of course, when it comes specifically to politics, you have to tread very, very carefully. And I remember just recently someone remarked, because I like to talk about controversial topics, I like to go right there. And someone remarked, Rabbi, you have a knack for talking about real issues, but not really saying anything. And at first, I was a little insulted, but I realized there was some truth to that. Because in today's day and age, if you really want to be able to bring people together, you have to be careful. Because you don't want to ostracize any segment in our community, especially when it comes to politics. And so today's topic is really around the realization that we live in a world of polarization, where people that we're very close to, we consider our friends, often have very disparate views when it comes to the political landscape, when it comes to even things which maybe are just closer to home, which might not affect, the national scene. Although with now what's going on in Israel, I feel like this topic is right back in relevancy, unfortunately, once again. A couple years ago, I came across an article by Chaim Seim, and we'll start with that article. It's the second article on your source sheets. There, if you don't have a source sheet, there are some in the back. And he writes in an article entitled, "Our Current Political Situation, Might This Be Modern Orthodoxy's Moment?" This was published actually the week of President Trump's inauguration. So the needs of the hour present a unique challenge, but perhaps also an opportunity for modern orthodoxy. America is in desperate need of healing, and with some hopeful optimism, there are several reasons to think that modern Orthodox Jews are well positioned to show leadership in this process. First, modern Orthodoxy already lives between the two Americas. From a demographic perspective, we seem blue. We tend to live in or near large coastal cities, have high rates of college and graduate school education at elite schools, and are well represented in the learned professions. At the same time, we also have much in common with the red America. We are religious believers who value faith and faith communities, believe in strong traditional families, and support Israel and its specifically Jewish identity. Second, we are a divided community, which in this context is beneficial. Much of the post-election analysis shows that America's polarization is caused by the fact that we increasingly live, work, and socialize among those we identify with politically. Add in media fragmentation, red and blue Americans simply live in ecosystems. In many ways, it applies to American Judaism as a whole. But modern Orthodoxy is a particularly tight community that divides more evenly between liberals, moderates, and conservatives. Most modern Orthodox Jews can identify someone who they not only know, but respect from a moral, religious, and intellectual perspective. This was true in 2017, and I hope it's still true in 2019. But I'd like to show you that this is not a new issue or a new challenge that has faced the Jewish community in learning to live in disagreement. The primary source I want to focus on is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that you're all familiar with. The Mishnah tells us in source 1, Kol machlokas shi l'shem shamayim sofa litzkayim, v'she'enu l'shem shamayim ein sofa litzkayim. Any machloket which is done for the sake of heaven will have enduring value, and if it's not done for the sake of heaven, will not last. Ezu machloket shi l'shem shamayim zu machloket hillel v'shamai, v'she'enu l'shem shamayim zu machloket korach v'chol adato. The prototype of a machloket, which was the Shem Shamayim, was Hillel, Beit Hillel, and Beit Shammai. And the prototype of a machloket that was not l'shem shamayim is Korach and his followers. The question I like to pose is as follows. Why is the machloket of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel considered the prime example of a machloket l'shem shamayim? As we'll see through the sources, it's clear that they sparred and they bumped heads in a dramatic fashion. It was very complex, the various types of arguments that they battled over. And secondly, what do these terms l'shem shamayim and sof l'yitzkayim actually mean in the Mishnah? Have you ever been in an argument that you didn't feel you were l'shem shamayim? Everyone thinks that their position is l'shem shamayim. You wouldn't have that opinion, or you wouldn't take that stance openly unless you felt that you were being honest and real and genuine about your opinion. So how do we understand this Mishnah? So I'd like to first take you on a little bit of a historical journey to understand the complexities of this relationship between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. The Mishnah in Shabbos Torah 2 tells us that there was a time when the Jewish community was trying to decide to make various enactments, various gezerot. We'll see what they were in response to in a moment. But in essence, in order to decide who to choose, who to decipher the halacha like the opinions of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the Gemara tells us that they took account of where was the majority. So in source 2 we said, Kisha'alu levakru nimnu v'rab Beit Shammai al Beit Hillel. And they found there were more members of Beit Shammai present than Beit Hillel. B'yudchet dvarim gazru bo bayom. And that day they established what are referred to as the 18 enactments. And we'll see what those were about soon. And the Gemara in Shabbos, source 3, tells us on that day, Natsu chera beit hamedrash. They took a sword, and a sword was punctured into the floor of the Beit Midrash. Amru hanichnas yikanes vayotze al yetze. Those who want to enter can enter, but you're not allowed to leave. Vo to hayom haya Hillel kafu v'yoshev lifnei Shammai ke'echad min al talmidim. And that day, Hillel, who had just been found to be of the minority, was told that you were going to not be the Nasi. Shammai would have the power, the authority. And the Gemara says that day was as disastrous of a calamity for the Jewish people as the day in which the Egel Azav was worshipped. So what happened on that day? It's a machloket. We paskin like at that time Beit Shammai over Beit Hillel. It seems like Ma'asim Shebechol Yom. This happens all the time in the Beit Midrash. We have a machloket, and we have to come to some sort of solution. So you have to look in the Yushalmi for a little more of a graphic description of what happened that day. Why was it so bad? Why was that day Kashli Yisrael Kiyom Shenasbo Egel? So Yushalmi, a shocking Yushalmi, tells us, what does it mean Shenasbo Egel? Kashli Yisrael Kiyom Shenasbo Egel, source 4. Yushalmi tells us, Tana Rabbi Yeshua Onia Talmidei Beit Shammai Amdu Milamata. The students of Beit Shammai would stand at the bottom, at the entrance of the Beis Medrash. This is the home of Hananya, the Aliyat Hananya, where this whole vote was taking place. V'hayu horgin b'talmidei Beis Hillel. And the Yushalmi says that they stood at the entrance, and why were they found to be the majority? Because they killed off students of Beit Hillel when they were trying to enter. It's a shocking Gemara. Tani Shishaman Alu Vashar Amdu Alein V'charvos V'ramachim. They were standing with their spears, ready to attack the students of the opposing school of thought of Beit Hillel. And the various commentaries on the side of the Yushalmi were arguing, how do we understand this Gemara? It's shocking. These are our venerable Talmidei Chachamim deciding halacha, and they were killing each other. So the Korban Ha'ada says, no, it wasn't so bad. Chas v'shalom. He writes in source 5, Ilu hayu rotzin la'alot. If they forced their way into the Beit Midrash, they would have got ugly. Abal chas v'shalom lo hargu otan. No one killed anyone. Chas v'shalom. Kind of whitewashing the Gemara. It never got that bad. They just were threatening them in order to keep their majority, to have majority rule. The Pnei Moshe, though, writes, in source number 6, first, the fact it was a calamity because Hillel was made into a simpleton, as opposed to Shammai, who was now the Nasi, the Odsha Hayu Beit Shammai Horgin Talmidei Beit Hillel. They understand the Yerushalmi as fact. The students of Shammai killed the students of Beit Hillel. Again, what were the issues they were debating over? I can't tell you the different schools of thought whether or not it happened or not, but the reason I'm painting this picture is to show, don't think that our era is so unique. Don't think the way we get so wrapped up in our issues, in our stances, that back then, Shammai and Hillel, they were best friends. They didn't have any fights. There was no complexity or depth to their arguments. No. Whether or not anyone was hurt, the Yerushalmi is painting a picture. This was a complex time. Something was going on here that would even think of someone maybe causing harm in order to push forth their stance. And of course, ultimately we have to go back and understand, so how in the world is Shammai and Hillel the paradigm of Machloket L'Shem Shammai? So the Yerushalmi, we have to kind of cut through some of the sources. We don't have a lot of time. But the Yerushalmi basically discusses that many of the 18 enactments were regarding various rabbinic prohibitions concerning interactions between Jews and non-Jews. Whether or not Jews could eat with non-Jews, whether or not Jews could eat the food that a non-Jew had touched. You look through in Source 7, many of the examples are listed had to do with whether or not we should come down harshly in terms of restrictions between Jews and non-Jews. And Heinrich Graetz, in the history of the Jews, actually dates when, around this time, which time period this machloka was taking place. He dates the events to roughly the year 66 CE, on the eve of the first Jewish-Roman War, also called the Great Revolt. So we're just on the heels or the cusp of Churban Bayis. Right? Churban Bayis Sheni is going to be in the 70 CE. So we're just leading up to that era. And Gretz writes, what was going on? What was the machloket? He writes, to cut off every link between them, the Jews and non-Jews, the followers of school of Shammai proposed erecting a barrier which should effectively prevent any communication by prohibiting the Judeans in future from buying wine, oil, bread, or any other articles of food from their heathen neighbors. These regulations were known under the name of the 18 Things. Religious fervor and political zealotry in those stormy times always accompany each other. The Hillelites, more moderate in their religious and political views, could not agree to such sharply defined exclusiveness. But when the synod was called together to decide upon the laws before mentioned, the zealots proved all-powerful. Does it sound contemporary? Does it sound relevant? It's 2019. It's 2017. It's describing, unfortunately, the climate where people don't invite certain families to their Shabbos table because they can't sit at the same table with people who have such disparate political views, and they don't know if they're going to be role models for the kids at the table, depending on how the conversation goes. How does halacha recognize this event, which the Gemara and ultimately the Shulchan Aruch quotes? When the Shulchan Aruch goes and describes all the various fast days that were enacted, that some we don't commemorate today, this date of this machloket, the Shulchan Aruch tells us in Siman Taf Kuf Pei in source 10, B'Tet Bo and the Tet of Adar. That's when this whole episode took place. Nechlu Beit Sham Beit Hillel, and historically, there was a time where people would mourn. They would fast on Tet Adar in commemoration of this event. Elia Rabbah writes in source 11, but what happened on that day? Nehargu Gimel Alafim Min HaTalmidim. They don't whitewash it. They take the approach that it happened. 3,000 students were killed on that day. And other commentators, halachic sources, take a little bit of a slightly different approach of what was so bad in this day, Tet Adar, that we're commemorating. The Levush in source 12 tells us that what was so bad that it was like the Egel Azav was worshipped. He says, Mikol Makom Nasi Torah Chas V'Shalom Kishtei Torot. According to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it's the next source, in source 13, that really what the problem was, there was such a fiery debate over these issues, whether we should make these enactments, Shezeh Oser V'Zeh Matir, and two Gedolim of the time were on different sides of the equation. This camp was saying it's Aser, this camp was saying it's Mutter, Zeh Metame, Zeh Metaher, Vein Yodim Shum Din Abor Yav. There was complete chaos amongst Klal Yisrael, because Klal Yisrael didn't know what to do. Is it kosher or treif? Is it tahar or tameh? And that was really the calamity. Not maybe Levush wasn't comfortable with that approach, that 3,000 were actually killed, but really the calamity of the day was a function of the halachic complexity or challenge that was posed by these debates. So what emerges from all this? We have to get back to our original question, which is, so why are Shammai and Hillel the example of a machloket l'shem Shammai? So the Gemara in Eruvin, a famous Gemara, tells us there's one of these machlokot between Beit Shammai and Hillel. It was undecided until a baskol comes out and says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. Really, they're both right. Ve'alacha kebeit Hillel. But the halacha, we actually, and to this day, we paskin, except for a few exceptions, we paskin machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel like Beit Hillel. Why? Both are truth. They speak Torah truth. Why do we pass them like Beit Hillel? Because they were easygoing. They kind of took the aggressiveness of Beit Shammai. They didn't have that same aggressive nature. And also, they weren't afraid to teach the Torahs of their opponents. They always taught what the party who argued with them, they always teach their Torah. Not only did they teach it, but they would always teach Beit Shammai's stance first. The Gemara is starting to paint a little bit of a picture of what captured the attention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as embodied by the Baskol that said we paskin like Beit Hillel. Another Gemara in Maseches Eidos, a Mishnah, in source 15. Sometimes we don't paskin like Hillel or Shammai. Why do we even quote them? So we see that whatever happened on that day, on Tet Adar, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel were able to move past it. They had their dark moments. They had their political debates of 2017 where people couldn't talk to each other. But what's starting to emerge is that after the dust settled, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel were still able to talk to each other. Here the Mishnah is telling us that they actually weren't Omen al Divreim. You have to wonder if there was some sort of wake-up call, maybe whatever took place on 9 Adar that was so disastrous, they changed their tune. There are even things that Beit Hillel was willing to concede to Beit Shammai and paskin like them. So, again, just to clarify, I started by painting a picture, things were complex. Because I want you to understand that Ein Chadash Tachar HaShemesh. Nothing is new. There were other complex times where the heart of the Jewish community was immersed in a heavy, heavy debate. But perhaps why the Mishnah Avot chose Beit Shammai Beit Hillel ultimately to represent paradigms of machloket is because despite the gravity of their debates, and despite what may or may not even happen at a time, their ultimate legacy, as shown in some of these Gemaras, Mishnayot, show that they ultimately figured out ways not just to coexist, but we'll see even to live in harmony. We'll skip down to the Gemara in Yevamot, famous Gemara. The Gemara says, Afal Pishnechlu Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, source 17, just reading the underline, Lo Nimnu Beit Shammai Milisa Nashim Beit Hillel. Despite the fact that they argued, they never said that their daughters couldn't marry the sons of the opposite school. Below Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai. They were willing to have shidduchim, and it wasn't an automatic X. If, they saw, who's your Rebbe? Beit Shammai, we don't want to marry that type of girl or boy. No, that wasn't how it was. L'lamedcha shechiba v'reyu nohagim zeh b'zeh. L'kayim ha'shnemar ha'emet v'ha'shalom ahevo. That something changed. Something changed, and they were able to see beyond their debates and ultimately the pursuit of emet v'hashalom. They learn not only to pursue truth, but also to try to maintain peace. We now can go back understanding that Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, despite their debates, they still maintain relationships. Now we can go back and see the Rishonim, how they understand, the commentators on the Mishnah and Avos. What does it mean there's machlok l'shem shemayim? What does it mean the machlok will be sofa litkayim, that it will always endure? And again, I want to clarify that my personal opinion is I find it very hard to believe that 3,000 people were killed in such a debate. I think it's somewhat telling that the Bavli doesn't quote the Gemara. It's left out of the Bavli, and usually when we have disparate texts between the versions between a Bavli and Yerushalmi, we pass like the Bavli. So I'm presenting it to show you there is this Shita, there is this Gemara in Yerushalmi. There was heated debate, but I like to believe that the schools of thought that understood that Shammai and Hillel maintained their friendship, and we'll delve into that further, ultimately is why we have them as the paradigm for our machloket. The Meiri, in his commentary on Avos, source 18, tells us, what is l'shem shamayim? And this is an important question for all of us. When we are debating with our friends or are not yet friends, how do we know what's l'shem shamayim? The Meiri writes, ultimately, if it's l'hodat ha'emet, v'lo l'kanter, v'lo l'nitzoach, if it's to know, if it's to pursue truth, but not to stick it to them, and not to win. And be willing that if the other person's right, I'll be willing to follow their shita. That's how we know if something is l'shem shamayim. There's a commentary I couldn't find much historically on Rav Matziel HaYizri, who writes in source 19, it all depends. What's your mindset? If you're just trying to pursue truth, you can maintain peace and harmony. If you're just trying to win, to show how bright you are when you get into these debates at your Shabbos table or in shul, during Kiddush, of course, Hashem ya'anisham ba'ofen sheyichlu kasher asla korach v'adato. He understands that what does mean machlok l'shem shemayim sofli tzkayim is if you're l'shem shemayim, the debate should linger. The debate should go on. But if you're just trying to boast and show off how smart you are, so we want that type of debate to dissipate, to disappear, to become irrelevant, just like the machloket of Korach ve'adato. Again, same idea is expressed in Perush Levavot in source 21, but he adds one more idea which speaks to what can emerge from a healthy debate. And he writes, "Shekavanat hachokim hu shimayidei ota machloket yitbarer ha'emet." If ultimately you're trying to pursue truth, that's what we want. We want to encourage our students to have healthy debate, to be willing to challenge each other, to be comfortable having a conversation with different opinions. But ultimately what will happen? The yatsa la'or mashlo haya yotze zulato. The Levavot says, when a machlok is l'shem shamayim, we've all had these debates. Ultimately, what can sometimes emerge is something that without having the conversation with someone with a different opinion, you could never have emerged. And that's what we try to create here, Maino. We try to create those conversations with different opinions where we respect each other. And from the conversation emerges a new understanding for all. That's what the Mishnah's shooting for, hoping for. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind when we think about our own issues that we keep coming back to, that we seem to bump heads with others. Rabbi Iyun says it more explicitly. We've just defined l'shem shamayim means if you're pursuing truth. But sofa litzkayim, what does it mean it will endure? Rabbi Iyun says, shelo olam yitzkaymu b'machloket. The goal is not sofa litzkayim. The Mishnah says sofa litzkayim doesn't just mean that the educational value will endure, But Rabbi Iyun says it means that the machloket will endure. Machloket inherently is not bad. We don't want to try to avoid machloket. We're not trying to be a community where everyone just toes the line and keeps their mouth shut. Right? That's not what we're shooting for. We want people to be comfortable expressing their opinions, listening to each other, and hopefully emet will emerge. And Rabbi Iyun understands the Mishnah is saying Shama and Hill's debate or Sofli Tzchayim means the machlokas survives. That we still today in our classrooms, in our yeshivas, in our schools, are still talking about Beit Sham, Beit Hillel as a machloket. And that's wonderful. The Maharal, in source 23, a beautiful Maharal. The Maharal is in the context of discussing really deep theological views about belief in God, belief in Judaism. And he has this beautiful approach. I'm not going to go through the whole thing inside, just to cover some ground. Maharal basically says, when you have someone who's debating with you, if you're not comfortable acknowledging their opinion, that's a flaw in your opinion. If you're not comfortable acknowledging the other side of the coin, that means that you're not fully confident in your opinion. The Maharal actually goes on to say that he's willing to discuss other religions in an effort to try to prove Judaism and Torah min Shemayim, because it buttresses our belief in what we believe in. He writes regarding the opinions of others that you may disagree with, the bold, you shouldn't hate the opinions of others who disagree with you. You should cherish an opinion that is counter of your opinion, because it allows you to strengthen your own beliefs and what you stand for. In the Sefer Yaros Tavash of Yonas and Eibeshitz has a beautiful, very practical, kind of speaks to your heart eitzah that hopefully all of us can take away from here, which is, as I stated earlier, have any of us ever been in a debate where we didn't feel we were l'shem shamayim? I would like to think that all of us, if we're having a debate, think we're l'shem shamayim. So how are we supposed to know if we're really l'shem shamayim? Everyone thinks we're l'shem shamayim, so how do you know if you're l'shem shamayim? So if Yonas and Eibeshitz has a beautiful litmus test. It says, you want to know how you should know if your heart's really in the right place? He writes, I should read the bold. He says, for in this world, every machloket, no matter what it is, the evil inclination tempts the person, says that it's for the sake of heaven. And for a great mitzvah, subdue traitors and break the arm of the mighty and so forth. Nothing's changed. The rule of the matter is, there is no machloket does not have within it the evil inclination, who is tempting the person and saying the whole intention is for the sake of heaven. And God forbid to say on a particular machloket that it's not for the sake of heaven. If so, how can a person know where the truth is, if it is truly for the sake of heaven or not? Here's the litmus test. If the divided ones and the parties in conflict, other than regarding the matter over which they are disagreeing and opposing one another, are truly lovers in their heart and soul, this is the sign their machloket is for the sake of heaven. However, if the enemies are holding on to hatred for one another through the machloket, this is not for the sake of heaven, and the Satan has settled himself within them. And this is the sign which the rabbis and Mishnah pass on to us, which is the machloket, which is for the sake of heaven. How true are these words? The litmus test is whether or not after the debate can you stand the other person. Would you invite them back for another Shabbos meal? If the answer is no, then something may have veered off course during your debate. If the answer is yes, I love them even though I strongly disagree with their opinions, that's a machlok l'shem shamayim. It's a powerful thought. It's a powerful idea. Where do we see in the Torah, where do we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself was a role model of debate? I spoke this with my students, my classes, so those of you who are there, you'll forgive me, or you can say this part of the shir. But we're learning Sefer Yonah this year in Ma'ayanot, this Elul Zman, and my students and I came to the realization that when Yonah runs, HaKadosh Baruch Hu never gave him the instructions of what exactly to say. The first psukim, verse 26, God just says, call to it, because they're evil. And he runs away from the Hashem. The Alshich has an unbelievable approach, unbelievable idea, that says, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu not say the nevuah of Od Abraham Yom Ninveh Nefechet, that the town is going to be turned over? And the Alshich basically explains, just kind of summarize, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that Yonah wanted to run. And HaKadosh Baruch, we have a concept of a Nabi who's kovesh nevuato chayiv misa. That if a prophet suppresses the prophecy and doesn't relay it over to the intended party, they deserve to die. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't say the words of the prophecy to leave an out for Yonah so he could run. What is Yonah trying to accomplish by running? The Alshich says that Yonah was l'shem shemayim for Klal Yisrael. He didn't want the Jews to look bad. And Yonah knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can read my mind. He knows when I run, God knows why I'm running. And his hope was, by running, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to know that I'm running on behalf of the mercy of Klal Yisrael. They shouldn't look bad by Ninveh's ultimate tshuva. And maybe Hashem will have Rahman on the Jewish people and not send him a second time, not give him instructions the second time. And my students help me understand by learning this Alshich, what it means is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was open to a debate. It means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not squashing Yonah's voice. Now, Parak Gimel tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu still stood by his opinion. He still went through with the mission despite Yonah's protest, which is also a powerful lekach. Because it means even if you're not necessarily going to change your opinion, it's still healthy to have the conversation. It's still healthy to hear what another person says. Even HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to Kabayachol have a debate with Yonah, a silent protest. We know those. You know about those in Mayinot, right? A silent protest of Yonah doesn't change his opinion, but he welcomes it. It's the same thing that happens in the episode of Avram and Sodom, where Avram comes and pleads on behalf of Sodom and Amorah not to be destroyed. Same idea. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is open to hearing another side. Even if he won't change his mind, it's still healthy to have the conversation. So what do we do with all this? How is this relevant to us, Bizman Hazeh? So of course, now you should resend those Shabbos invites, Yantif invites, all those people that you'd crossed off your list. Of course, that was my practical takeaway. But there's something else I want to share that I think is very relevant to the Yom Noraim. The Tur tells us, when it comes to the efficacy of the tshuva process of the Yomim Noraim, the Tur tells us, in source 28, the last page, V'yitein kol adam el libo b'erev Yom HaKippurim lefayis kol misha pesha kenegdo. A person should go and try, before Yom Kippur, to try to appease, try to smooth out anyone who there's an iniquity in front of him. Da'averot shebein adam l'makom Yom HaKippurim mechaper b'shavin v'shebein adam l'chaverot in Yom HaKippurim mechaper ad shifaysen. Famous idea, Yom Kippur is only going to atone for those sins between us and God, for the sins between us and man, so we need to go out and try to resolve our differences and smooth things out. But I noticed when seeing this Tur, that the Tur writes that who do you need to mefayes, who needs to go smooth things out? Misha pesha kenegdo. Someone whose sin is in front of you. What does that mean if their sin is in front of you? Who is the perpetrator? Who is the victim? You can all hear me, I assume, right? Yeah. I don't have this on Shabbos, so I'm used to not having a microphone, right? Who is the perpetrator? Who was the victim? So the Rush makes this comment. The Rush points out in source 29, Rav, the great sage, once had some beef, pun intended, with this shochet, Right? He had some dispute with this shochet who gypped him. You know? Natar le tresar yarche deshasav lo asa. He waited a considerable amount of time for the shochet, the butcher who had gypped him out of some money, overcharged him, and the butcher, the merchant, never came to apologize. Ki mata mala yuma de kipure amar izal ana. And Rav said, when it was Erev Yom Kippur, he said, you know what? I'm going to go to him. V'apikle midate ke'shei lev kol Yisrael shalem im chaveru. Rav said, it's important that if I have a disagreement with someone else and I'm harboring that resentment, I'm going to go to that person in order that kol lev Yisrael shalem im chaveru, that the Jewish people should enter Yom Noraim in a state of peace. And so what does the Torah mean when he says, Kol mi shepesha kenegdo? It doesn't mean just. Of course, if you think of all your sins, you should try to go and apologize for things you've done. But the Rosh is explaining that Rav's example for us is to take it a step further. If there's something that you're sitting with, that you're bothered by, it's a good idea in the next 2 weeks to reach out to the person and say, I'd like to talk. I'd like to discuss what happened 6 months ago, 6 years ago. I'd like to just work through it if possible. And this is brought down la'alacha. The Mishabura tells us that a person really all year, it'd be ideal to go have these conversations. But Avav Erev Yom Kippurim in source 30, mechuyav l'takin hakol k'dei she'itaher. We had an obligation to go out and try to smooth over any bumps in the roads with any relationships that we might have. Mishabura Paskins, or gives us advice. Nachon, how should this look? Nachon sheilech ba'atzmo elav. Go yourself. V'lo yishlach tzachila emtzai sheyirtze lekav piyusim. Don't send someone else. Do it yourself. V'im kasha alav leilech ba'atzmo. If it's difficult to go by yourself, tzachila o sheyodea sheyoter karva piyus adei ish emtzai. If you know the person's not going to be able to hear it, then yitavech beineim yachol asai de emtzai. Then you could send someone else. The Mishabura is telling us very practical halacha for the next 2 weeks. If you know that the person is not going to be receptive to smoothing it out, so then send someone else. He also adds another line of a sensitivity. Usually you have to tell the person as part of the vidur, part of the kapara, you have to say what it is you did. If the person would be very embarrassed by having that conversation, then you don't have to say it. Mishabur is telling us that there are conversations that we should try to be having right now, in this time period, leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Difficult conversations. But difficult conversations that one would hope and daven that what will emerge is a rekindled friendship, a rekindled relationship with loved ones. And the Pri Megadim writes lehalacha in source 31 that when it comes to these two disparate forms of kapara and Yom Kippur, he writes af chilek gavoa shabo enimchal ad shiratze chaveru, which means that there were two parts of kapara that will take place in Yom Kippur: the part that Hashem will forgive us, and the part that we will go to our friends and try to achieve atonement. Pri Megadim says that the aspect that Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us a free pass, or allows to forgive, Hashem's waiting to see if we're going to forgive others. And that Chela Gavoa, that part that we all, money in the bank, where we look forward to in Yom Kippur, get out of jail free card with Bein Adam Lamakom, Hashem, the Pri Megadim tells Hashem is waiting to see if we're going to take the step, the initiative to try to also smooth out the differences that we may have in our own lives. Just conclude with one practical thing. I think we've said it, but I'm just going to tell you that I have tried to put this into practice over the last number of years since I came across some of these sources. I try to think in these days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, about who are the people not just that I've wronged, of course, reach out to those people, but who are the people that I really feel that they've wronged me and that there's really hope to smoothing things out. And every year I try to keep the list small, try not to be a bad person throughout the year, but every year there's one or two people that I find myself reaching out to during this time of year. And without fail, it has never backfired. You call someone and say, I'd like to go out to Starbucks with you. I'd like to take you out to Lazy Bean. I'd like to talk. And before you go, you have to let whatever anger and resentment, the pesha connected, you have to let that all go. Because the point is not to get back into the fight, but to go and just say, whatever happens, I'd like to move past it. I'd like to have those difficult conversations. But the hope is, by having those difficult conversations, we can move forward as a more united friend, family, and community. May we all be zocha to see the power and importance of difficult conversations in our personal and communal lives, in the world that we live in, the complex age of polarization that we are a part of. We do have a powerful role, but it starts with each and every one of us. Thank you for listening.